Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Studying Law Around the World, podcast where I interview people from all over the world, asking about how does it work to study law abroad, and also how do practice abroad looks like. Today, I have the honor to receive Ben Ho and to host him in the podcast. So, Ben, thanks so much for joining us today. It's great to host you at the podcast, and to get our conversation started, would you please introduce yourself for our listeners?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. My name is Ben Ho. I'm a law student in my third and final year at Harvard Law School. I grew up in Singapore, immigrated to a small town outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in the US in 2006. Then I went to Allegheny College and graduated in 2014, and then worked in education and immigration consulting before starting law school in 2020. Then I'll be going to New York to practice corporate law after graduation for the foreseeable future. Yeah.
Fantastic. That's awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us. Um, Kind of how we've done this in the podcast in the last couple of episodes. I've tried to standardize the first few questions so that people who are just interested to get like an overview of how law school abroad works, they can get like the same information from all different countries. And the first question is just about how long is law school in your country? And then we're talking about like where you're studying law school. So how long is law school in the US? And also, is it an undergrad program?
Oh, yes. So in the US, law school tends to be a graduate level degree. It's about 3 years. And if you're an international student, you can also do a 1 year LLM program. So typically it.
All right, fantastic. Great. Thanks so much. Well, and let me ask you, for example, here in Brazil, normally when you go to law school, it is an undergrad program, so a lot of differences, but also normally you get a set schedule, right? We do have some electives and optionals, but it's very much like most people will study the very same things. So how
Mhm.
does it work in the US? Like, are most of the courses mandatory? How does that
Yeah.
work?
So the first year of law school in the US is fairly standard for everyone. And it's typically the most difficult, the first year. So we all more or
Mm-hmm.
less take the same curriculum. And some of the courses will include contracts, civil procedure, torts, criminal law, property, constitutional law, things like that. And you also get to learn something like legal research and writing. So in your second and third year, it's typically more like a choose your own adventure. At least that's the case at Harvard. So in these 2 years, you take different electives of your choice. For me, I focus on taking a lot of corporate law and tax courses because I knew I was going to be a corporate lawyer. And then other students would focus on more traditional, like litigation based courses, right? Like admin law, First Amendment, federal courts. There's also a lot of room for specialization. Like, for example, if I wanted to focus on things like the blockchain or artificial intelligence, there'll be also other seminar based courses that will allow that. And finally, there are also other options like law clinics, which are more
Mm-hmm.
practical. So, like, there's like the religious and liberties clinic, or there's like a criminal law clinic. It's basically the opportunity you get to work with clients pro bono and learn some applicable skills, build some pro bono hours, get some client interaction ahead of practice.
Sweet, that's awesome. Well, that just made me curious about something else. So, regardless of the courses you end up choosing, does everybody graduate with the same degree? Like the name of your degree and everything is the same for everybody?
It's a really good question. I would think so. So
Mm-hmm.
for myself, like if you go to a U.S. law school, right, you're going to get a JD, Juris Doctor. But
Mm-hmm.
I guess for LLMs, that would be a master's in law, right? So depends on the
Yeah.
program you join. Yep.
Okay, perfect. That makes a lot of sense. And that question just comes because the LLMs, I guess, in some schools you can choose a concentration
Yeah.
and kind of like that goes in the name of your degree, right? So,
Oh, interesting.
well, awesome. Well, also just a like final standard question, does law school have any kind of dress code?
Yeah, it's a cool question. Not really. Although most people will dress fairly presentably, right? Like collared shirts, things like that. But I've also seen a range, right? From hoodies to t-shirts to suits. Really varies. I've certainly worn t-shirts to
Hmm.
my classes, and I never thought I would. I also started during a Zoom year, right? So my first year was unfortunately online, and in that
Hmm.
year, it was very easy to wear like a sweater and then or wear something formal on the top, but at the bottom it was just wearing like sweatpants and it didn't matter. So I wonder if some of the informalities came from the Zoom world back into the real world. Maybe I don't know.
Oh, that's quite interesting. Yeah. Um, well, here in Brazil, we don't have much of uh, like a dress code for law school as well. So
Mhm.
I got to experience some of the in person before COVID, and I
Mm.
guess it's been following the same trends. I don't feel like it had many significant changes here, but I could see how other countries could have brought the informality from the Zoom world. That's a lot of food for thought. Um,
Interesting. So wait, I'd love to hear. And so Brazil is how
yeah,
long is law school in Brazil?
yeah, great call. So it's a 5-year undergrad program,
Five
so it's a
years.
bit different. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, we have 4 years of undergrad and 3 years of law school. So it could be it could be 7 years before you even practice, right? And undergrad
Hmm.
doesn't really matter what you study to. Like I studied
Hmm.
philosophy and political science, which is pretty traditional, I think, for a lot of law students. But you can also
Hmm.
be a physics major. You can study anything conceivably, and it would not really matter for whether or not you get into law school, because you're going to be learning something new, basically learning a new language, right? It doesn't matter what you
Yeah.
study.
Yeah, that's something super cool about this system that goes on in North America and some other countries as well.
Mm.
Uh, well, going into that, even like about your personal experience, can you tell us a little bit about Harvard and like, did you always have the go to study there, or like, did you decide it like at a specific point? How did that happen to you?
Yes. So I am very, very blessed to be here at Harvard Law School, right? It was certainly a dream school of mine since my freshman year of college. That's the first year in undergrad. And I certainly didn't think it would ever be in the cards. But here I am in my final semester, and I'm grateful for all the opportunities it's afforded me. But I'm also sad that it's almost over, right? It's frankly an amazing place with some of the most ambitious and capable people I've ever met. And I'm lucky to be able to go to school with such classmates. And I know that everyone here will end up doing amazing things and we're all going to have a great network, right? So yeah,
That's fantastic. Awesome. Well, talking about this experience of yours at Harvard, I know that one of the things you do is to host a podcast, right?
hmm
So would you mind telling us a little bit about like maybe first like extracurriculars and stuff you get to do in law school if you want to, and then also like a little bit about your personal experience about hosting a podcast and how has that been for you?
sure. Yes. Thank you for that. So just about extracurriculars in general, there's so many options, right? I mean, they're all legally based, certainly. But you can come to okay, so at HLS, Harvard Law School, we have so
Hmm.
many options, right? If you're a litigator, you have options over there to do litigation based things. For me, I knew coming in that I wanted to work with corporate law, work with startups. So the org that I joined is called HLEP, the Harvard Law Entrepreneurship Project. HLEP is a student practice organization that serves startup founders from the Harvard and MIT community. So what we do is we work with attorney advisors from some of the elite venture capital and emerging companies law firms, and we get their guidance to answer some questions that founders are going to have. We write a memo for them, and they'll take it and do other things with it. So I knew coming in that was I wanted to work for one of these firms, so that's how I positioned myself to join such an org and get all the experiences that I got, and it was amazing, right? So along the way, I realized for myself that we have all these amazing resources, but they're only limited to Harvard law students, and I wonder what it is we could do to share it with people beyond the Harvard community. And on that day in particular, that was when the idea to start a podcast dropped into my heart. So this podcast is called the HLEP podcast, right? And the HLEP is short for Harvard Law Entrepreneurship Project. And our first season is called Cradle to Exit. And we have practitioners from some of the best firms, again, from the emerging company space, teach us what lawyering is like throughout each stage of the corporate lifecycle, from company formation through financings and eventually exits like mergers and acquisitions and IPOs. The podcast is now in its second season, and our first half includes guests like Matt Levine, the Bloomberg columnist, to Justin Osofsky, the chief operating officer of Instagram and the VP of Meta. And the next half is really about introducing listeners to the next exciting emerging industries like AI, Web3, and space. So it's really been like founding and running a startup, much like I know you understand, right? Running a podcast is a lot of work, but it's also very rewarding. It's been super fun. I've interviewed so many amazing speakers. I've learned so much about corporate law, and it's really surpassed all my expectations. So, if you're interested in corporate lawyering in America, I encourage you to tune in on Apple and Spotify.
Awesome. Yeah, to the listeners, you can find a link to the podcast that Ben hosts here in the description of this episode. Well, Thank you so much, Ben, for your willingness to join us today and to answer these few questions about law school in the US. I was wondering, is there anything else that maybe I forgot to ask, or maybe something that you'd like to bring up about your experience in law school in general?
Not in particular. Although I think maybe a final word for me is just to encourage everybody to dream big, really, if you and to have a plan behind your actions, right? And to be intentional with everything you do. Because I think it's so easy to just I cannot believe I'm in my final semester here at HLS. And it went by so quickly. And I wish and I mean I guess I can look back now and I'm so proud and happy about how it all went. And my best advice for everybody is that it's going to be over sooner than you can imagine. So a lot of mixed emotions right now as I come on the finishing line. So thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun talking.
Yeah, thank you so much for your willingness to be here today, and I'll see you in the future. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. See you in the next episode.